If you grab a Bible, find a book called Matt or Saint Matt by some, and go to where it says Matt 5, it'll start with these things called the Beatitudes. A lot of the time, though, they don't seem true, which is unfortunate because it is the Bible and all. One day, though, when the big man's in charge again, they'll be true in every way and it'll be freaking sweet. For now, we catch glimpses of what that will be like. So me and a few mates of mine live in a neighbourhood called Bryndwr out the west side of town, and here are some stories of when we were lucky enough to catch glimpses of what that kingdom of God is like when these Beatitudes are coming true. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, just following the earthquake, I met a woman called Jill. Jill lived in Bexley, post-tense. She had lost her home. When she left it, it was flooded and it was broken. Her life's belongings were all over the floor, and as she left it, she did not know if she would see them again. She had slept that night in her car with her husband, and when I met her, she was on the other side of town, many, many, many miles away, in Burnside, tired, broken, over it, at the end of her rope. And so after she stayed that night at church, she joined us for prayer the next morning, and this is her prayer. It started, "Dear Lord, I know we haven't talked in a long while." And it ended with her crying and a smile upon her face. Jill was at the end of her rope with an empty spirit, but she knew she was loved. 3 days later, we had been running around hectically for what felt like a couple of weeks. We'd been finding homes for people. We'd been having meetings. We'd been strategizing, having more meetings, running into brick walls, trying to sleep on our feet with our eyes open and our ears perked. And unsurprisingly, we ran out of gas. We were over it. We couldn't see a way forward. And every time people looked at me, they commented on how tired it was. And in my insecurity about that, I worked a lot harder. And only then, with no energy left, I stopped, prayed, rested, crashed. I could see God in all that we'd been doing, but I only felt him in myself when I stopped and said, "Lord, there's none of me left." Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Earthquake night began with a lot of mourning at our flat. Word went around our neighbourhood that we had food, hot food in fact, and drinks. This was before we had food anyway to heat it or anything for people to drink, although that's another story. But people came and the food appeared and the two came together. We washed plates with rainwater as fast as they were being used. We lit candles for light as it got dark, and they kept us warm. The women and one or two men as well started to do each other's nails, which was curious. As people trickled in, so did their stories. There's no wall in our bedroom. There's rain coming through our roof. I'm a tourist. My hostel collapsed. I have nothing left in this country. My kids don't feel safe and I'm too scared to help them. What's going on? We met families, kids, parents, tourists, older people, people with disabilities. We all came together, knowing the state of our city and mourning the day that had been. We ate and we felt warm by candlelight, and as we shared together, felt sad and lost and lonely together. As we mourned together, we were comforted. So at the end of the night, as we were farewelling people or finding the beds, it was interesting to watch different faces leaving the house to the ones that had arrived just before. Some people who had a few hours earlier been shell-shocked and silent were now laughing, saying thanks, ready for the night. Others, though, hadn't changed. They still looked scared, still looked lost, still looked lonely. And I guess we have to hope that there was some comfort for them. Blessed are the meek. They will inherit the earth. There's someone in our community called Ben, and while we were all running around doing incredibly important things responding to the earthquake, Ben offered to wash our clothes, clean our houses, clean our dishes, and do the small things. For 4 days he spent time with an intellectually disabled man, sorting out his medication, helping him to make cups of tea, trying to find his social worker, trying to find his home. At the end of those 4 days, found a place for him to stay. Ben was willing to be childlike, doing the small things like the girl in this picture, and to be just in one place at one time and to be fully there, while the rest of us were rushing around all over the place trying to be everywhere. Ben was, in a word, meek, and he was blessed. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, one of Christchurch's biggest injustices following the first quake was supermarkets in the west of the city throwing out tons of food because it was scratched, while people out east were struggling to find any food at all. And we were set for a repeat run this February earthquake until 1 or 2 people from our community found out about it. You should have seen how angry they got, hungering and thirsting for the right thing to be done when it seemed that the opposite would happen. So they spent their weeks picking up food from supermarkets in their increasingly smelly van, washing it, cleaning and scrubbing it late into the night, and then the next morning dropping the food off to food banks out the east side of town, and then returning to the supermarkets to rinse and repeat their whole cycle. It was hard work, thirsting to do what was right. But the guys in that crew found it so rewarding to do such good work. I think there's something about working stinking hard that when it's for the right reason, you just seem to get a lot more than you're giving. And excellently, these guys filled others who were hungry and thirsting as well, not to mention inspiring many of us too. So there is a case in point. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They shall be filled with tasty, tasty supermarket food. Blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called the children of God. Now, from well before we moved into our neighbourhood, there are 2 families on our street who have been arguing and arguing and arguing, and it hurts. The children learned lies from their parents, and now the children scream those lies at each other across the street. And in the midst of this, 2 of them fell in love in some sort of modern low-key Romeo and Juliet sort of thing. And these 13-year-olds were just very keen for each other. Now, we knew these kids and we know their parents, and the whole thing sucked. So we'd been playing with the kids separately, and we thought, well, let's play with them at the same time. We told them not to insult each other when they were with us, or at any time, because when they insulted each other, they were insulting our friends. And when they asked why we weren't on their side and why we were on the other side, and asked whose side we were on, we said, there aren't any sides. And slowly things have come together. They're allowed to come and play together now, and while the mum's shaking hands, having a cup of tea and making up is a long way off, we've started to see some change. And in the midst of that, when one mum asked who we were and why 20-something-year-old students wanted to play with her 13-year-old kid, and we said we were Christians, it seemed to make sense to her. And now in all of this, there are setbacks and there's hurt and relationships suffer and things suck. But hey, that's God's kingdom for you. You keep on hoping and you love the signs that you get to see, and slowly the kingdom comes. So there are some stories of the glimpses we've caught of what it is like when God is in charge and the Beatitudes break through and we see what they are like in our lives. I hope that these stories will help you to see some glimpses of your own, so that you can go back to your neighbourhoods, back to your communities, and have a look and see where these Beatitudes are coming true.